Hi there, everybody. I'm Fred Thomas, and you are watching All Things Bike, brought to you by Zentis Wheels, AD Bikes, and Frame and Wheel. And today we are speaking with Pat Moody of AAA Northern New England and Paul Niehoff of Portland Area Comprehensive Transportation System. Paul, Pat, welcome to All Things Bike.
Hey, Fred.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, my goodness. Thanks for
Definitely.
coming down. Now, before we get started, I've got to tell you a story. I think late last year, you may have heard the story, but for our viewers, late last year, the show got an email. And not only did we get an email, we got an email from a viewer who thought that the show was a call-in show. So he was watching, I think it was the episode about bike law. And he wanted to participate in the discussion. So that was very flattering to learn that. He was looking around for 1-800-CALL-BIKE or something. But it's not a call-in show, not yet. And I can sort of understand why he called, because in that episode, we were talking about bike law, what a cyclist should do if they crash or they get in a crash with a car. Take a picture, get a report together, do all this stuff. And this guy, it was a small business owner, and he had this story, which was he was in his car in Portland, and he heard a tremendous thunk, and he looked back there, and a cyclist had just crashed into his van, his commercial vehicle, and did damage to the door and the window. But then the cyclist was okay, and he just got on his bike and took off. And it was a sort of a stark contrast to everything we'd been talking about on the show. And that opened my eyes a little bit, and it made me realize that the show should have a perspective, of these issues from the perspective of cars. And so that's why I reached out to you, Pat, to get you on the show, and that's how we decided that Paul would be a good sort of balance or alternative view to the whole thing. So that is why you are here, and thank you so much for coming down. And so before we charge in, let's hear about each of your organizations. Why don't you start, Pat?
Sure. Well, AAA has been around for 115 years. It's an advocacy organization. We started off actually right down here on Commercial Street, and it was great, or at least for Northern New England. And it's all about advocating for motorist rights, but also for safer roads, safer transportation. And after we gained that recognition as being an expert in some place where people would get together to start advocating for ways to improve transportation, that's when we started to bring on other specialties like emergency road service, insurance, travel services, and whatnot. So today, that's still central to what we do. We're very active in the legislature. We work on, serve on a number of different task forces throughout the region, some with Paul through some of the strategic highway safety planning with the Bureau of Highway Safety and the Department of Transportation. Really working to make sure that we're sharing the road safely out there, that we're all trying to get to and from places safely, and keeping that first and foremost.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's great. That's interesting to hear. And how about you, Paul? Describe. You're involved in many organizations, but there's PACS, and then there's Greater Portland Council of Governments, and then there's a BCM. So give us a perspective of your organizations.
I'll try to make it short.
No, go for it.
We are housed with the Greater Portland Council of Governments because we share resources. Okay. But PACS is actually what they call the Greater Portland Area Comprehensive Transportation System, which is the federally designated area around Greater Portland. There's 4 in the state. We're the largest. Right. We cover the population of just over 200,000. And the easiest way to say it is we deal with everything that's transportation related, including transit and the ferry service from Arundel to Freeport out to Raymond, 18 communities. So we're called a regional transportation entity or a metropolitan planning organization. Right. We do a lot of work with the Bicycle Coalition of Maine because, as Pat said, we're trying to balance the transportation system so that everybody can get around either the way they choose to, or if they don't have any choices, to get around safely to do whatever they have to do.
Right, right. So transportation is the common thread or the common interest.
Definitely.
So that's, we'll delve into how it relates to bikes, but that's where your interest meets. Is there a place where your interests don't meet, or where you can really say that you're different from each other, do you think?
I don't think so. It's like I said before, we know that, crashes in general. Talk about what's going on in this country right now.
Right.
We're at about 6.5 million car crashes annually. Right. It's a big number, and that spiked in the last couple of years. Yeah. Fatalities, those we're going to be up over 40,000 fatalities this past year. So we've seen the largest 2-year spike in 53 years. So, and that's among everything: car crashes, bikes, pedestrians. Fatalities are going up. So, groups, AAA, Paul's groups, the different state agencies are getting together, really trying to seek some answers to what's going on and trying to improve the situation.
I mean, that's refreshing. So for once, people are looking at the same problem, even though they might be from a different sort of part of the discussion. But so, I mean, is it distracted driving here that we're talking about, or distracted cycling, or just more people on the road, more cars? I mean, what do you think?
I think obviously the economic activity plays into it. So we're seeing a recovery in the economics across the board. Right. Gas prices are lower, so there's a little bit more activity out on the road. But distraction is really what people are pointing the finger at right now. What we're seeing, it doesn't take much to go outside and look out and you see somebody on their phone or looking down on it. And in fact, there's the bill in front of the legislature right now. Senator Bill Diamond has introduced a bill to call for no longer being able to hold a cell phone in your hand while driving. So make you put it down, get it out of the way, so you're less likely to take a selfie, Snapchat, check your Facebook as you drive.
Yeah, well, I mean, we all suffer from that. I mean, I know the temptation too. I mean, I really have to fight it and have to leave the phone connected to. I mean, I don't carry it, but it's a tough one. I mean, when you look at all these problems, so you got crashes, and then you've got things like, a motorist opening a door into traffic, or the right-hand turn that cars frequently do when there's a cyclist sort of in the same lane. How much of that is education or lack of education or awareness, let's say, and then how much of it is just like the roads are too narrow, or planning issues?
Well, I've always said that we are lacking in encouragement, education, and enforcement when it comes to bicycle pedestrian interactions.
Yeah.
We have a tendency to focus on the infrastructure and do bike lanes and signs and those type of things, but when we do those, I think we've done a poor job in general of educating the traveling public as to what it means. It just sort of appears.
Yeah.
But then there's a whole other realm in the areas where you can't actually do the physical improvements, where the education is huge in how you're supposed to use the transportation system as a driver, as a cyclist, or as a pedestrian.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting point. Can you think of an example? I mean, is there one that comes to your mind recently that would sort of highlight this? Like bike lanes, for example. There are a bunch of new bike lanes on Forest Avenue.
Well, to take that's a good example, that was part of a DOT safety project that was actually to improve the high crash motor vehicle locations on the ramps. But we worked with the City of Portland and the DOT for quite some time to come up with the green bike lanes and bike lanes through that interchange. But they just appeared without an explanation as to what they really mean. Yeah. And what they mean is, since there are bicycle lanes there, that's a situation that's a preferential use for bicycles, which means the drivers have to yield to the bicyclists under those circumstances, either coming off or going back onto the on-ramps. And I'm not so sure that everybody knows that.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
We offer educational courses for teens taking driver's ed. We also do people that are offenders, and then we also do safe driving for mature operator courses, refreshers, point reduction, and also insurance discounts. We have those classes, and we talk about some of the changes that have happened, and they're confused that why are those lanes so narrow? I can't fit my car in those lanes. So, not enough emphasis when they do some of those engineering changes to educate the public on what's going on. Maybe that it's coming into play, and then how to interact with whatever the changes are that have gone into.
So I'm sorry.
I could think of another example, and you might remember this. On Marginal Way, where our offices used to be, or where our offices used to be, and your office is still there, the city of Portland took a 4-lane road section and made it into 2 lanes with a center turn lane, which is called a road diet. And they striped, they developed on-street parking and a bicycle lane.
Yeah.
And once they did that, the people that were driving actually thought it wasn't 1 lane, that it was actually now 3 lanes.
Yeah,
because they hadn't learned on what was what. And I actually got a call from Bruce Hyman in the city of Portland and asked me to park my vehicle in the parking space out there to let people know that there was actually parking there.
Wow. How would you get the message out? I mean, is this something that has to be legislated, or is it something that you would do through a advertising campaign, or is it the responsibility of both organizations somehow?
I would think that you could do it as PSAs or article in the newspaper,
right?
If it rises to that level,
right. Wow. Well, what about the programs that you offer in general? I mean, you offer educational programs for cyclists through the BCM, and then there's I guess driving programs for teens. Elaborate on some of those things for us. Would you start, Pat?
I think you've got many more programs than we do.
Yeah, I think a lot of times we get our license when we're 16.
Yeah.
And that's
very young.
That's the last time we get that formal education where we're taking in new laws and understanding things have changed a lot since a lot of people got their license. And they might not have kept up with some of the law changes that have gone down. So, it's important to do the due diligence as a motorist, as a bicyclist, as a pedestrian, to read up and understand what the not just laws are, but best practices, how to be safe out there and how to work with each other.
I mean, is there more about, or will there be more about bicycle safety in the legislation? Or you mentioned the LD11 earlier.
Yeah.
What was that?
So last week, the Bicycle Coalition of Maine helped pull this legislation together, LD 1130.
1130, right.
And it was heard in the Education and Cultural Affairs Committee. There was a public hearing on it last week.
Right.
Great turnout, a lot of people in support of it. There was a couple people that were opposed, a couple organizations that were opposed, mostly educational ones that felt like there was a lot being put on public school systems anyways. But what it calls for is at least an hour of education on bike and pedestrian safety, traffic safety really, traffic safety for school-age children, so kindergarten through high school.
Right, and so that sounds very useful. I mean, kids, if they learn their habits early, I suppose it's gonna stick with them. Is there something like that in the bicycle side of things, where cyclists really are encouraged to see the perspective of the drivers, and raise their awareness?
I was involved with the committee that developed that, and one of the things that we made a point of is we wanted it to go through high school,
right?
So that it gets translated over to kids that are learning to drive and taking their driver's license and understanding the laws around being a driver, but also being aware of what we call vulnerable users, which are people that aren't in motor vehicles.
Yeah.
And being the agency we don't really have programs per se for education, although we will be working on a metropolitan planning organization safety plan over the next 8 months, which will deal with motor vehicle high crash locations, which we're working on, but also the vulnerable user, what's going on out there, what are some of what I call the systemic issues, like distracted driving or speeding, that aren't necessarily related to bike lanes or specific infrastructure things.
And on that, is Portland a safe city in the scheme of things? I mean, nationwide. What would you say?
I think that I'm a driver ed instructor as well, so working with teens.
Right.
And I'll tell you, this is a great place to learn how to drive.
Why? Is it?
It's fantastic. I mean, it's challenging.
Right.
There's a lot of old roads. There's new roads, new engineering. There's the bike lanes. There's a lot of pedestrian traffic. So kids that learn how to drive in Portland, they even get up on 295. They're experiencing all these environments.
Yeah, the freeway.
And so they're getting a chance to understand that pedestrians and bicyclists and other vehicles can be unpredictable. You teach them how to do it in the book this way, and this is how everybody's supposed to do it.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily happen. Like, all bets are off when you get down the old port, right?
Yeah, right.
So it is a great place to teach kids about it, and you'd be surprised that when you get through, and maybe you wouldn't be surprised that those 16-year-olds, when it comes time to answer those questions about how far you should be from another bicyclist, from a bicyclist as you're passing them, they know the answer to that.
Right.
I think Portland and the educational piece here for teens it's a good environment.
Yeah, no, do you get the sense too?
I think it's
cyclist bike.
Safe's a relative term, but I think it's generally fairly safe. Things happen.
Sure.
But I think we've seen the number of cyclists and certainly pedestrian numbers increase over, say, the last 5 or 6 years. And just because there are more cyclists, the drivers are more aware that there are to expect cyclists.
Right.
For instance, if you're driving on Main Street in Freeport, you can pretty much expect to see pedestrians all over the place.
Right.
So you're more aware of it, and you're just watching out more than you would necessarily in some other location.
Yeah, I mean, is that when you're driving down the road, is all this stuff coming through your head when you're driving around Portland? Are you thinking about driver instruction and you're thinking about planning?
I definitely do.
Yeah, I can believe it. I mean, I think the theme that I see a lot is just portray cyclists as humans, right? And they're people too. They're not just people who are wearing helmets and with flashing lights and looking strange and doing sometimes silly things on the bike. And all drivers are not sort of crazed, distracted, angry people. Everybody is in their own little zone.
We've got a great PSA on sharetheroad.aaa.com, and it depicts exactly that. It's got some great theme music going. It sees the bicyclist riding down the road, and it says "loving father of two," and it goes through the different scenarios. We've seen it, and it talks about this isn't a cyclist on the side of the road. This is somebody that your job, beyond everything else, is just treat them like their family. Make sure that you're giving them the care. That they're vulnerable. They don't have a crumple zone around them.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, and it's great to see that's happening. Well, what would be the most important rule for a driver to have in mind when they're driving and they see bikes, and same with a cyclist? What's the most important thing that a cyclist should always look out for when they're riding on the roads? In the starkest, clearest terms.
you got to be able to see them first, right?
Okay.
So distraction-free driving is absolutely necessary, and riding for that matter, or
yeah.
pedestrians.
Oh, I know that.
Paying attention to what's going on. We all have to abide by the same rules, so they need to pay attention.
So just put the phone down
first and foremost.
Yeah, put the phone down and stop sort of zipping around the radio. And then for a cyclist, what do you think?
I think exactly the same thing. Is be aware of your surroundings and expect the unexpected.
Yeah.
For instance, you mentioned what we call in the bike world the right hook.
Yeah.
If you're a cyclist and you're on the right of a vehicle and there's a turn coming up, you as a cyclist ought to expect that car to turn in front of you.
Yeah.
And that way you can be ready for that to happen. Or as the term I'll use, vehicular cyclist, you would be either in front or behind that car. So that conflict of the turning car wouldn't happen. And that again is an educational component.
See yourself as from from the perspective of the other. I mean, that transfers to a lot of things.
When I'm riding and I see a car approach a stop sign, and I think this comes from my motorcycle days. Yeah, I either try to make eye contact with that person, or I'm watching the front wheels of that vehicle to see if they're going to start to move and which direction they're turned in. Yeah, to expect possibly that person not to see me and to pull out. And speaking to that is, I think what you alluded to is, for cyclists, is to be visible. Yeah. Not only visible with brighter clothing or lights, especially at night, which is in law.
Or early morning,
Or early morning, but even lights during the day, but also being visible in traffic, as opposed to like riding way over to the edge under certain circumstances where you can't be seen as readily as you might if you were more visible.
Or changing sort of from pedestrian, you're riding on the sidewalk and then hopping onto the road and then not stopping and being unpredictable. Now, well, that's such great perspective, and I suppose we just can't say it enough. Be visible. Don't be distracted. Plan, think ahead, plan ahead, try to anticipate, look at the driver, just pay attention and go for it.
Another tip for motorists, being able to see those blind spots, especially in Portland where sometimes the roads can narrow. You might have a bicycle, you might be stopped in traffic or coming to a stop, and a bicyclist could be coming up beside you. And needing to see what's going on before you take a right or whatever else that's going to happen. We recommend that motorists turn their side view mirrors out about 15 degrees on each side. So to do that, you'd lean your head up against the driver's side window, turn it out so you can just barely see the edge of your car. Move yourself into the center, right, kind of in line with the center of your vehicle, and adjust that mirror so you can just barely see the edge of the car. When you're sitting behind the steering wheel, you now can't see the edge of your car, just outside of it, but now it captured that blind spot. So you have a better ability to see that. Now, at the same time, you can't trust your mirrors.
That's right.
So you use your mirrors, but then you always have to check before you go.
Yeah, that's so true. I'm trying to do that myself. It's very easy to forget, but I think you can learn it. I think I find that I'm looking over my shoulder. It's a small thing to learn, but it could really.
That's a good point. I learned something right now.
Exactly. Right on. Well,
Drive Red has changed a lot in the last 40 years.
I know. No, it's exactly. I don't. Yeah, exactly. I got my driver's license years ago, and I haven't taken an update course. So I'm sure I would benefit too, and I will try. And now, do you ride a bike, right?
Yeah, a little bit. I wish I rode it more. I've got a nice bike that's in the garage, and I'll be getting more. Especially if we're having more days like we just did this weekend.
That's right.
But
So that's great. So you've got your foot in both worlds.
Yeah, and the other thing that I see from an engineering perspective when I'm out there riding, and this is from my motorcycle days as well, is road conditions. And the conditions of the pavement, and Maine is in rough shape. Our roads are in rough shape. It's causing a lot of damage to vehicles. It's making it challenging to ride bikes out there, and it's maybe not just the pavement condition, but whatever it is for broken parts or broken glass in the bike lanes, things like that make it a super challenge to be out there.
Yeah. Well, so you get a hands-on reminder of that aspect of the condition. I mean, can you do anything about it? I know that I heard that you can call up the DOT and say, hey, there's a 6-foot pothole over on this road. Is that the case? I'm not sure.
You can certainly do that. They used to have a spot main system, but I'm not sure if that is still in play.
Right.
And that was the old-fashioned days when you would mail a postcard in.
All right.
But that's certainly one aspect. And then the city of Portland, specific to city of Portland, has what they call C-Click Fix.
I see. Yeah, you report it online.
Which you can report all kinds of things online, and they follow up with a response.
Yeah.
So, but certainly calling the DOT in Scarborough if there are road conditions that are unsafe is important.
Yeah.
I know a lot of cyclists out there are always calling their community, particularly about sweeping either the bike lanes or the shoulder of the road,
the sand,
especially this time of year.
Yeah.
I'll give a shout out to Portland Public Works.
Sure.
We called them, I think it was about 2 weeks ago. The manhole that's right in front of the entrance to the AAA office, which is also right beside that bike lane, it created a pretty good sized pothole there. Maybe not even 20 minutes later, they were there filling it. I was just amazed. So amazed, I ran out there with a couple of hats and said, hey, great job, guys.
That's good to know.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah. I mean, we can make a difference, or we can get involved. And but what about the bigger picture, the outlook for transportation around Greater Portland or Maine? How does it look from the car perspective?
Looking back at the educational piece, I know the Jim Taskey from the Bicycle Coalition of Maine, he's just in the final stages of creating a module to be embedded into the Maine Driving Dynamics course. It's like if an offender, you get too many points on your license, or it might be just your business has said that you need to go take a defensive driving course for their insurance purposes. He's created a pretty good sized module for that from an educational standpoint. So I think that's going to help get the message out to the broader audience too.
Right.
The best that we can engage the media in the messaging too. I know that a number of the news channels around here have done some interest stories on it, and some of the news journalists have been cyclists and motorcycle and bicyclists as well too. So they've done a good job on it.
Yeah.
But Portland is it's a beautiful city, and I think we definitely plan for the growth.
Yeah.
And
more people. I mean, the demographics are changing such that more young people are maybe moving from Maine to the city.
There's definitely a switch in the demographics, and also I call them kids because of my age, in their 20s, they're choosing to not purchase a vehicle because of either costs or living in an urbanized area where you have more access to things without having a motor vehicle.
But you bring up an interesting point. If you don't own a car, you don't have auto insurance, clearly. But if you do own a car and you have auto insurance, that auto insurance can protect you if you are in a crash with a car and you're the guy on the bike. So there's a funny sort of loophole there. And AAA provides insurance. Would there ever be a chance that AAA broadens insurance policies to beyond car owners and maybe cyclists? In some
We have
way?
started in some regions, not in AAA Northern New England. It's something that we've been looking at, but they do offer roadside assistance for
Right.
bicycles, and once again, it's not here in
Right.
Northern New England, unfortunately, yet, but it may be at some point where they out in Washington State, and I think Portland, Oregon, they do it. I think AAA Southern New England, down in the Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut area, they started offering
Right.
that service as well. So.
I mean, that sounds like an evolution,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that AAA is known to the world for cars or motorists, but maybe would it change to transportation in the more general sense, possibly, or is
Yeah,
it's
I
hard
mean,
to say.
it is. We've been the general sense. I mean, we've distributed bike safety materials and gone out to schools and
Right, yeah.
provided materials to school resource officers for as long as we've been in existence. So it has been from the youngest age all the way up through, and then into auto travel and flight, cruises and whatnot.
Yeah,
so making sure people are safe and
Bike tours,
no matter what they travel. Yeah, and we've done a number of stories in our Journey publication too.
Yeah.
Trying to get out bike tours and
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, and frequently you drive to a place where you get on your bike and ride. And but the PAX has got a program called Tomorrow, Destination Tomorrow, but out to the year 2040. So that's
Destination 2040.
Destination 2040.
Yes.
Not tomorrow, right? So I mean that's an extremely long-term view, and I
is.
imagine it's changing. But what are some of the features in there that would relate to cyclists?
Well, it's the mode shift and balancing. We talk about balancing a lot. It's the mode shift and balancing transportation choices, either transit or electric vehicles, just to give people a choice. Because we like to say, even if you're a driver and that's all you do is drive, at some point you're a pedestrian.
Pedestrian, yeah.
And there are more people that want to be pedestrians,
Yeah.
and there are more people seemingly that want to be able to ride a bike and feel safe.
Yeah.
So I think there's a big move into generally making our communities more vibrant and livable, for all the reasons that you want that to happen, be it safety, economic development. So that's related to pedestrians and bicyclists in the plan is trying to make those things happen.
Yeah.
And of course, it's a big plan, so there's a whole bunch of other things in there having to do with land use and density.
Yeah, it's complicated, but you got. I mean, if you've got a framework, at least you can go in the right direction and
yeah, it's a
make progress.
guide. It's a guidance document.
Yeah. Wow. Well, very exciting. Now, before we wind it down, there was a mention of a BioVision program, or I guess a camera that monitors traffic. I just wanted to give you a chance to bring that up, and any other sort of programs that are on the horizon that we should know about.
Yeah, I mean, it's a small part of what we do, but we purchased 2 BioVision. I call them cameras, but they're specifically made to set up to video intersections or traffic corridors or wherever you want to do counts.
Okay.
Traffic counts, be it motor vehicle counts or bicycle counts or pedestrians. It's primarily set up for doing traffic studies and deciding on intersections and signals, whether you need signals or not.
Right.
But since it's a video system, you can also watch the video and watch and see what's taking place out there from a behavioral standpoint,
Right.
like in an intersection.
Right.
so you can actually see what's going on with pedestrians and bicyclists and how everybody's interacting, primarily in intersections, because that's
Sure.
where the most complicated movements are.
Yeah, that's right. And so that's what those little black things are that go across the road. In some sections, they look like a hose.
Well, those are actually pneumatic tubes.
But they keep count.
They do keep count.
Yeah.
And they have smaller ones that will actually count bicycles.
Right. But that's just.
But this is
yeah.
kind of a unique camera that's on you mount it to a pole and you put the camera up where the traffic
Right.
signals
so
are.
you have a much more human view of what's going on. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe there's someone's backing up over it or something. I don't know.
Yeah, and we're going to be using that quite a bit coming up this summer.
Fantastic. What about you, Pat?
It's amazing the technology
I know.
and what's going on, and even when you look at automobiles and, the blind spot monitoring and all the semi-autonomous features that are being built into cars now, and working towards an autonomous vehicle, and what is that going to what is that going to mean to bicycle and pedestrian safety and understanding that. So it's a lot of work to do on that front, but in the end, we're hoping that, all this safety is going to end up improving the safety of our highways. So.
Yeah. No, well, that's great. I think I sincerely hope it does, and I'm pretty sure it will. I mean, and you guys are great ambassadors for it. You are sort of from the different sides of the spectrum, but here you are, talking to each other, talking to me, and I'm very civilized. No one's throwing chairs or raising their voice. So that's great. It's great to see you both doing that, and thanks for doing it. Right? I mean, the viewers are cyclists, but they're viewers who are, I guess, they're drivers too, and it's great that they get to see the whole picture.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, you guys.
Yeah,
Thanks for having us.
It's all about having good laws,
That's right.
Great education, and enforcing those laws. So if we can all work together to make the road safer, that's what.
Pay attention and be human.
Exactly.
Yes. Exactly.
All right, well, there you go, folks. That was Pat Moody of AAA Northern New England and Paul Niehoff of the Portland area comprehensive transportation system. I got it.
All right.
You can learn more about both those organizations online. You go to the internet and you type in AAA Northern New England. You'll find out about the programs that they offer. Same thing with pax.org. I'll just give you that. And also you can see more at the BCM, Bicycle Coalition of Maine website. That's all we have time for right now. Thanks so much for watching, and we will see you again soon.
All Things Bike with Fred Thomas is brought to you by Zentis, performance carbon wheels handmade in Austria for road and off-road riding. Zentis, next generation wheels. And Frame and Wheel eBay bike selling services. Time, space, cash. Pick 3. And AD Bikes, the modern face of Austro-Daimler cycling and the bike company of the future.